Spanish Love Deception, by Elena Armas. Chapter 6. I was not panicking. Nope. My apartment was a war zone, but I was chill. The clothing explosion. Under control. I looked at myself in the generous mirror placed against one of the walls in my studio apartment with what I promised would be the last outfit I tried on. It was not that I didn't have anything to wear, my problem was far simpler. The root of my predicament, and as of now, the biggest headache of the month, and all things considered, that was saying something was that I didn't know what I was dressing for. Be ready at 7 sharp. Evening gown ideally. Why I hadn't pressed for more details, I did not have the slightest idea. Except for the fact that it was a mistake I was unfortunately familiar with. This was how I approached things. I rushed into them. Reason why I'd somehow managed to weave my existence into knots I didn't know how to untangle. Evidence number 1, the lie. Evidence number 2, what the lie had led to. In other words, the deal I had struck with someone I would never, not even in my wildest dreams know, nightmares I have imagined needing. Or being needed by. Aaron Blackford. Loca, I muttered to myself as I unzipped another garment. Was it even an evening gown? Me he vuelto loca. He perdido la maldita cabeza. Slipping out of it and throwing it onto the bed with the rest of the discarded dresses, I reached for my robe. The fluffy pink one, because I needed all the comfort I could get and I couldn't think of any other way to get it. It was either this or stuffing my mouth with cookies. Taking in the state of my apartment, I massaged my temples. Not having walls separating the living room from the bedroom and kitchen areas was something I usually loved. Something I like to see as an advantage of living in an open studio space, even if limitedly small, since this was still Brooklyn. But inspecting the mess I had made of the entire apartment, I sort of hated not living somewhere roomier. Somewhere with walls that would stop me from wrecking the whole place. There were clothes, shoes, and bags scattered everywhere on the bed, sofa, chairs, floor, coffee table. Nothing had been spared. The usually tidy apartment that I had so carefully decorated in whites and creams with some boho details here and there, like the beautiful woven rug that had cost me more than I'd ever admit, closer resembled a fashion battlefield than a home. I wanted to scream. Tying the belt of my robe tighter, I grabbed my phone from the top of my dresser. 2 hours until 7 sharp. And I was helpless. Outfitless. Because I didn't have any dress that resembled a gown. Because I was dumb. Because I didn't know what I was dressing for and I hadn't asked. I didn't even have Aaron's phone number to text him, and a few hostile emojis to make myself clear. It wasn't like I had ever found pleasure in fraternizing with the enemy, so I had never needed his number. Not until now, apparently. Throwing my phone on top of a discarded pile of garments, I headed for the snug space that was my living room. Grabbing my laptop from the round ecru coffee table I had picked up from a flea market a few weeks ago, I placed the device on my lap and let my body fall onto the sofa. Once settled in the padded cushions, I logged into my corporate email account. It was my last resort. With a little bit of luck, his workaholic ass would be sitting in front of his laptop on a Saturday. And wasn't this deal we had made a little like a business transaction? It had to be. We weren't friends or friendly, so that didn't leave room for more than a purely I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of deal. A favor between colleagues. With no more time to waste, I opened a new email and started typing. From Martin@intech.com to a Blackford@intech.com subject, urgent info needed. Mr. Blackford, I was irritated at myself, yes, but also at Hema, and I wasn't in a first name basis kind of mood. As per our last conversation, I'm still waiting for you to disclose the details of our upcoming meeting. I find myself without all sources of information, which will consequently lead to an unsuccessful completion of the contract discussed. I had watched all seasons of Gossip Girl, and I knew the terrible consequences of wearing the wrong thing to a social commitment in New York freaking City. As no doubt you are aware of, it is of utmost importance that you share all info needed at your earliest convenience. Please get back to me ASAP. Warm regards, Lena Martin. Smirking at myself, I hit send and watched my email leave my outbox. Then, I stared at my screen for a long minute, waiting for his answer to pop up in my inbox. By the third time I unsuccessfully refreshed my email, the smirk was long gone. By the fifth, little drops of sweat, which were partly due to the fact that I was clad in a winter robe, started forming in the back of my neck. What if he didn't answer? Or even worse, what if all this wasn't more than a prank? A mean way to mess with my head and make me believe he'd help me. What if he'd carried me? No, Aaron wouldn't do that, a voice in my head said. But why wouldn't he though? I had more than enough evidence compiled to prove that Aaron was very much capable of something like that. Did I even know him at all? He attended social commitments that had to do with good causes, for crying out loud. I did not know him. Fuck. I needed those cookies. I'd indulge. When I returned to my laptop, cookie package in hand and mouthful of sugary and buttery comfort, Aaron's answer was waiting for me. A tiny sigh of relief left my lips. Biting on a new cookie, I clicked on Aaron's email. From a Blackford@intech.com to Martin@intech.com subject, urgent info needed. I'll be there in an hour. Best, Aaron. What in the fuck? A fit of coughs prevented me from finishing that, the mouthful I had been chewing on getting stuck in my throat and not moving anywhere. Aaron was coming to my apartment in 1 hour. Which was an hour before we had agreed he'd pick me up. Grabbing some water from the kitchen, I looked around, taking in the chaos. Mierda. I shouldn't care, I knew I shouldn't. But Aaron seeing this? Hell number. I'd rather choke on another cookie than give him ammunition against me. I wouldn't hear the end of it. I placed the glass back on the counter, and without losing a second more, I put myself to work. 1 hour. I had 60 minutes in knowing Aaron, it wouldn't be a second more or less to fix this wardrobe mayhem. And just like that, it took me the whole hour to leave the apartment presentable enough, so when the doorbell rang, not only had I not had any time to change into something that didn't make me look like a human-sized Furby, but my frustration had also only increased. Stupidly punctual man, I muttered under my breath as I stomped toward my apartment door. Always on time. I buzzed him in. Fixing the messy bun atop my head, I tried to cool off. He's helping you. Be nice, I told myself. You need him. A knock on the door. I waited 2 seconds and took a deep breath, readying myself to be as nice as I could manage. Grabbing onto the handle, I arranged my expression into a neutral one and threw the door open. Aaron, I said in a clipped tone. I was about to say a broken bar something else, but whatever that was vanished. Along with that neutral expression I had been going for. My lips parted, jaw hanging open. Yeah, I started again, not finding any words. I cleared my throat. Yeah, hi. Hello. Whoa. Okay. Aaron stared back at me with a funny look while I simply blinked, hoping that my eyes hadn't grown too big in my face. Although how could they not? How couldn't any pair of eyes not grow 2 sizes bigger at the sight of what was in front of me? Because that wasn't Aaron. Number. New. Before me was a man I had never seen before. A version of Aaron that was different from the only one I knew. This Aaron was, drop dead gorgeous. And not in an easy on the eyes way. This Aaron was elegant. Classy. Sleek. Attractive in an overwhelming ladies and gents, grab your fans kind of way. Shit, why did he look like that? Where was the Aaron in dull slacks and a boring button down that I had blacklisted and filed under Do Not Touch? How in the world had it taken me nothing more than a single look at him to stutter like a schoolgirl? Blinking, I found the answer right in front of me. That enormous and lean body that I shouldn't have been noticing this much was clad in a black suit. No, it wasn't a suit. It was a tuxedo. A freaking tuxedo that belonged on a red carpet and not in the door to my apartment in Bed-Stuy, if you asked me. Nothing about him belonged here with me. Not his midnight hair, not the crisp white shirt and bow tie, not that deep blue gaze that surveyed me and my reaction, not the freaking movie star tux, and certainly not those dark brows that were drawing together on his forehead. What the hell are you wearing? I asked in a breath. Is this a joke? What did I tell you about trying to be funny, Aaron? What am I wearing? I watched his eyes leave mine and travel down my neck, looking me up and down a couple of times. Me? Something changed in his expression, as if he couldn't understand what he was seeing. Yeah. Feeling extremely exposed and uncomfortable, I waited for his gaze to return to my face, not knowing what else to say or do. What is that? I whispered loudly for a reason I couldn't understand. I feel the obligation to ask you the same question. Because I wasn't specific. He pointed a long finger in my general direction. But I imagined you were smarter than assuming I'd take you to a slumber party. I swallowed, fully aware my ears were turning red. But I shook my head. This is actually good. This Aaron I could deal with. I knew how to do that. Unlike the other version that had punched the breath out of my lungs. That I had no idea what to do with. Fixing my gaze on his face, I squared my shoulders. Oh, you think I should really change? I grabbed onto the hem of my pink robe, trying not to think of how ridiculous I was actually feeling and hiding that emotion behind all my bravado instead. I wouldn't want to show up overdressed to the slumber party you mentioned. Do you think there will be any snacks? He seemed to consider that for a long moment. How are you not boiling up inside there? That's a lot of velour for such a tiny person. Velour? And that's a deep knowledge in fabrics for someone whose wardrobe is made of two different pieces of clothing. An emotion flickered across his face, one I didn't catch on time. He closed his eyes very briefly, inhaling through his nose. He was irritated. His patience slipping away from him. I could tell. We won't make it. We're doomed. First, he said, regaining his composure, you blatantly ogle me. That sent a wave of heat straight to my cheeks. Busted. Then, you reprimand me for what I'm wearing. And now, you criticize my sense of style. Are you going to let me in, or do you always keep guests outside your door while you insult them? Who said you were a guest? Inhaling through my nose and not hiding my irritation at him calling me out, I turned around and walked away, leaving him standing before the entrance to my apartment. You invited yourself over, I said over my shoulder. I guess you don't mind letting yourself in either, huh, big boy? Big boy? I closed my eyes, extremely thankful to be facing the other way. Still not able to believe I had really called Aaron Blackford big boy, I headed for the kitchen area of my studio and opened the fridge. The cool air graced my skin, making me feel only slightly better. I stared into it for a full minute, and when I finally turned, I did with a fake smile. Aaron Blackford and his tuxedo leaned against the narrow island that delimited my kitchen and living room spaces. His blue gaze was somewhere above my knees. Still studying my attire, which he seemed to find so outrageously intriguing. It bothered me, I realized. The way he looked at it made me feel inadequate even though I was at home and he was the intruder who had shown up earlier than we had agreed. It was stupid, but it reminded me of how small he had made me feel all those months ago when I overheard him talking to Jeff. Or how he had almost thrown that mug I had gotten him as a welcome gift at my face. Or how all the remarks and jabs that came after they had never stopped bothering me. Rosie had been right, I wasn't capable of letting it go. I was still holding my grudge like my life depended on it. Like my grudge was a door floating on the ocean and I was out of life jackets. It seems rather inappropriate for summer. Aaron nodded at my robe. He wasn't wrong. I was boiling up, but I had needed the comfort. I imitated him and leaned on the kitchen counter behind me. Can I offer you something to drink, and a winner? Or would you like to point out any other way in which my robe is outrageous instead? I watched his lips twitch, fighting a smile. Me, on the other hand, I found none of this remotely funny. How about water? He did not move a single muscle besides the corners of his lips, which were still battling against that smile. You know, I retrieved a water bottle and placed it beside him. Then, I grabbed another one for myself. You could have just emailed me back. You didn't need to show up here this early. I know. Of course he did. I did you a favor, coming here ahead of time. A favor? My eyes narrowed to thin slits. Doing me a favor would have included showing up with your pockets filled with churros. I'll try my best to remember that, he said, sounding like he meant it. And just as I was opening my mouth to ask him what that was supposed to mean, he continued, "Why didn't you call me instead of sending that broken bar intricate email? It would have saved us both some time, Miss Martin." That last part he added with a scowl. Ha, I knew that Mr. Blackford would strike a nerve. Okay, first of all, I didn't ask you to come here. So, that's on you. I opened the lid of my bottle and took a gulp of water. And secondly, how would I have called you if I don't have your number, smartass? I looked at him over the bottle. Aaron's dark brows knit. You should have it. On our last division's team building event, we passed along all our private phone numbers. I have yours. I have everyone's. I slowly lowered the bottle and screwed the lid on. Well, I don't have yours. I had refused to save Aaron's number because, again, I was a grudge holder. Something that didn't make me feel all that great right now, but that didn't change the truth. Why would I have needed it anyway? I watched him take in my words for a moment, and then he shook his head lightly. Straightening, he leaned away from the kitchen island. What was so important then? He got us back on track. What details do you need disclosed with so much urgency? I can't pick an outfit if I don't know where we are going, Blackford, I pointed out with a shrug. It's like dressing up for dummies 101. But I told you. One of his eyebrows rose. A social commitment. That's what you said. I placed the bottle on the counter and then brought my hands together. And it wasn't enough information. I need a few more details. An evening gown, the hard-headed, blue-eyed man answered. That should have been enough information to pick a dress. Scoffing, I brought a hand to my fluffy pink chest and clutched my metaphoric pearls. Enough information? I repeated very slowly. A nod. Yes. I sneered, not believing my eyes. He genuinely thought he was right about this. 1 and 2 worded responses are not enough information, Aaron. Especially after seeing that he looked ready to jump into an Upper East Side gala where people air-kissed each other and talked about their vacations in the Hamptons. I certainly didn't have anything like that in my wardrobe. What's so hard to understand about the words evening and gown? His hand absently went to the sleeve of his tux jacket. They are gowns for evening events. Dresses. I blinked. Are you really explaining that to me? I started feeling a new wave of frustration rush to my head. You are just, I continued, fisting my hands, edging very close to really throwing something at him. Ugh! Aaron's hands went to his pants pockets as he eyed me, looking all a broken bar handsome and classy in that goddamn tux. Something must have bubbled all the way to my face because the way he looked at me changed. It's a charity event. A fundraiser that takes place every year, he explained. My lips parted at that crucial piece of information. We will have to drive into Manhattan or Park Avenue. No, 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 number. That sounded fancy. It's a black tie thing, so you'll need to dress up. A formal evening gown. His gaze went up and down my body with doubt, finally settling back on my face. Just like I said. Aaron, I gritted out through my teeth. Murda. Joder. The Spanish bad words rolled off my tongue. A fundraiser? A charity event? That is so a broken bar upper classy. I shook my head, my hair almost coming off my nut. No, it sounds upper I wipe my ass with dollar bills classy. And no, I don't mean to be judgy here, but, Jesus. Bringing my hands to my head, I started pacing the few feet that comprised my kitchen space. A little heads up would have been nice. You could have told me yesterday, you know? I would have gone shopping this morning, Aaron. I would have prepared, I don't know, a few options for you to choose from. I have no idea what I'm going to do now. I have a couple of formal gowns, but they are not right. It was past 6 in the evening and you would have done all that for this. His lips parted very briefly, giving him a bewildered air that I was not used to seeing in him. Then, his jaw returned to its former position. For me? I stopped pacing. Yes. I crossed my arms in front of my chest. Why was he so shocked? Of course I would have. Studying his face, I took in the weird way in which he was looking at me. First of all, I would hate to show up to your charity event I air quoted looking like a clown. Believe it or not, I do have some sense of self-esteem and the ability to get embarrassed. Aaron's eyes kept shining with that quality that made me nervous. And second of all, I wouldn't want you to retaliate and wear God knows what to my sister's wedding, just to spite me. Or back out on me for some kind of etiquette infringement now that I'm counting on you coming to Spain with me. I trailed off, losing my voice. I kind of need you, you know? That last part had somehow materialized on my tongue. I didn't realize it had left my mouth until it was too late and I wasn't able to take it back. I'd never do that, he answered, catching me by surprise. I won't back out. We have a deal. Feeling exposed by my admission, I averted my eyes. I focused on his hands, which had fallen out of his pockets and rested by his sides. I won't do that, Catalina, I heard him say. Not even if you really pushed me to, and I know that you can. I had the feeling that he had purposely said that with sarcasm. Just enough to bait me into snapping back. But for some reason, I didn't. His words felt sincere. But I just couldn't know if he meant it. It was really hard for me to get past our history. All the jabs, nudges, and shoves. All the small ways we had made sure the other one didn't forget how much we disliked each other. Whatever you say, Blackford. I didn't sound like I believed myself, but it'd have to do. I don't have time for this. Whatever this was, I wasn't sure anymore. I brought my hand to the side of my neck and massaged that spot absently. Just, make yourself at home. I'll see what I can find for this fundraiser we are attending. I walked to where he was standing, his large frame blocking the opening that gave way to my living area. Coming to a halt a step before him, I looked up and arched an eyebrow, asking him without words to please move. Aaron's head towered over my short height, staring down at me, his eyes flying all over my face. Down my throat and around my neck. Right, where my fingers had massaged my skin a moment ago. His eyes returned to mine with something I didn't recognize in his blue gaze. We stood close, my bare toes almost touching the point of his polished shoes. And I felt my breathing increase its pace at the realization. My chest moved up and down more quickly with every second I was under Aaron's scrutiny. Refusing to look away, I held his stare. Leaning my head back, I couldn't help but notice that he felt larger than ever. As if his frame had expanded a couple of sizes more. Seeming much taller and bigger than me, all clad in that tux that had the power to turn him into someone I was finding hard not to look at. Not to drink up every detail that sparked with this newness he seemed to be carrying around today. Aaron's tongue peeked out and traveled along his bottom lip, driving my gaze to his mouth. His full lips shone under the light of my kitchen. My skin started turning too warm beneath the fabric of my stupid robe. Standing this close, I was feeling too hot, seeing too much of him, noticing way too many things at once. I wheeled my gaze up, back to his blue eyes. They were still studying me, that something still locked in. Hidden behind them. A heartbeat passed, and I could have sworn that his body inched in my direction, just the splinter of a hair. But maybe it was just my imagination. It didn't really matter. I was serious. His voice was low and hushed, the quality of it almost raspy, hearing it this closely. Every rational thought was long lost, but I know what he was talking about. Of course I did. He exhaled softly, and I smelled the mint on his breath. I wouldn't retaliate in any way. I know how important your sister's wedding is. The truth behind his words hit me harder than the lack of distance between our bodies. My lips parted, and my stomach dropped to my feet. I won't go back on my word. I never do. Was Aaron Blackford really reassuring me? Guaranteeing me that no matter what was or had been between us, this was safe ground? That he would keep his word, fair and square? That he wouldn't go back on it? Was he doing all that? It certainly sounded like it. Which told me that either he read minds, which I honestly hoped he didn't, or that perhaps Rosie hadn't been wrong about him. Maybe Aaron wasn't all that bad. Maybe I had been wrong about him. I didn't know what to say to him. What to do with any of this, frankly. And the longer I spent in silence, with him radiating this openness right on me, the more he made me warmer and dizzier, and the harder it was for me to complete thoughts. "Do you understand me, Catalina?" he pressed, that warmth coating my whole body. "No," I wanted to say. "I don't understand a single thing that's going on here." My throat moved, my vocal cords somehow failing at voicing an answer. A strange sound left my lips, making me clear my throat right after. "I should go," I finally managed out. "If you don't mind, I should change. We will be late otherwise." With a motion surprisingly smooth for someone his size, Aaron moved out of my way. He placed his body to one side, still too large and wide for my cramped apartment. Still taking up too much space and still making me feel itchy and tingly. Especially when I walked past him and my robe-clad shoulder brushed his chest. His very hard chest. All the heat I felt in my body rushed back to my face. "Stop." I moved on weak legs, my skin feeling clammy. "I just need to get out of this robe," I assured myself, tugging at the neck. That is the only reason why I am flushed and warm. Walking to the other end of my studio apartment as I fought the urge to fan myself, I made myself think about something else. Dresses. Not Aaron. Not him in a tux. Or his minty breath. Or his chest. Or any other body part. Not what he said either. But my head started turning, wanting to look back at him. Number. Reaching my wardrobe, I threw the doors open. Rummaging around as I searched for whatever I owned that would rise to the occasion, I slowly regained my focus. I fished the one piece of clothing with the potential to save my ass out of the depths of my wardrobe, grabbed the pair of heels I reserved for special events, a couple of accessories, and headed for the bathroom. On my way, I gave Aaron a sideways glance. He was hovering somewhere close to the velvety blue sofa, dwarfing it, his gaze on the screen of his phone. He didn't even lift his head when I walked in front of him. Good. Better than him snooping around or flaunting his apparently very distracting body around. It had to be the tuxedo. This behavior of mania, this reaction he had caused in me wasn't normal. I will, get ready in there, I said over my shoulder to the man who seemed to take all the space in my small apartment. Make yourself at home. Once inside the only walled room in my apartment, at the bathroom, I felt somehow lighter. My skin cooler. It didn't have a lock, so I simply shut the door and hung the dress from the shower bar and started with my makeup and hair. After what seemed like an eternity and at the same time, not nearly enough time, I was finally content with how I looked. The woman who stared back at me from the full-length wall mirror I had cleverly installed in the bathroom was wearing a sleeveless floor-length dress. A color somewhere between onyx and midnight blue. The cut and the fabric were rather simply, and definitely not evening gownish and wood, but the slit that traveled along the skirt all the way up, stopping above my right knee, gave it a graceful and classy touch. Although the real star of the show was the neckline, which even if it didn't give an inch of cleavage away, closing around my neck like it did, was embedded with white beads that imitated pearls. It was absolutely beautiful. That was exactly why I had impulsively bought it months ago. And why I hadn't had the chance to wear it yet and forgotten it was even there. My gaze inspected the waves of brown hair falling on my shoulders. Nowhere near perfect, but it would have to do. For a long minute there, I considered putting on red lipstick. But I quickly discarded it, thinking it would be overdoing it. I'd rather reserve that for a real date. Not that it would be happening anytime soon. Dates hadn't been in the cards for a long time. Sighing softly, I felt an uncomfortable twinge in my chest. I hadn't gone on a date in what felt like an eternity. Not that I considered myself unworthy or unattractive enough not to pique someone's interest. I had gone on a few dates here and there shortly after moving to New York. But at some point, I had stopped trying. What was the point when it was clear there was something wrong with me? I might have left Spain, but somehow, I had managed to leave my trust and my willingness to fall in love ever again somewhere across the ocean. Looking at myself in the mirror, I realized I hadn't put effort in my makeup, hair, and clothes for just as long. And now, I wished I hadn't noticed that. because pitying myself was something I had long ago promised myself I wouldn't do. It was a route I swore I wouldn't take. Then, why was I feeling this way? How had I let myself get here? To the point that for the first time in months, I was putting actual effort in my appearance and my clothes, and I was doing it for something that wasn't even real. A fake date. A deal. A sort of business agreement. Jesus, how had I gotten to the point where I needed to make up a relationship, so I didn't feel like a total failure? My fears rang as true as ever. I was broken. A knock on the door returned me to the present, reminding me of who was waiting for me outside my bedroom. Impatiently, if the pounding on the door was any sign. How much longer is it going to take you, Catalina? Aaron's notoriously deep voice carried through the bathroom door. You've been in there long enough. I looked at the time on the little clock I had on one of the bathroom shelves as 6:45 p.m. Still 15 minutes to spare if we went by the time he had initially agreed to pick me up. I shook my head. Another knock. This one was harder. More impatient. Catalina? I decided to answer his lack of patience with silence. Someone had to show him that he couldn't always get his way. Plus, I had been promised 15 all right, 14 minutes more. Still feeling the crack that had reopened in my chest, I slipped my right foot inside one of my heels and lifted it to the toilet seat. Meticulously, I worked on the strap. Taking my time, I did the same with the left one. I still had a few minutes, and I planned on a third knock never came. My lockless door flew open, startling the crap out of me and revealing a very restless man. Aaron's simmering blue eyes found mine. I stood in heeled and shaky legs as I felt my chest heave with the aftershock of the intrusion. Catalina. A speck of relief surfaced in those blue pools of impatience. Why didn't you answer when I called your name? You've been in here for a whole hour. His palm was still on the doorknob, one of his feet on the tiled floor and his wide shoulders occupying all the space beneath the threshold of the door. His blue eyes searched my face very slowly. Almost painfully so. So much that my breathing didn't get a chance to go back to normal and scattered all over the place. I watched Aaron's eyes traveling down the length of my dress, his expression hardening with every inch he navigated. I could see his jaw cramping down tightly by the time his gaze made its way back to mine. A muscle jumped. Was he mad? It certainly looked like he was. For what reason, I couldn't fathom. But it was right there. His lips pressed in that tight line that screamed something bothered him. A subdued voice in my head told me that he probably regretted ever asking me to come to this thing with him. The attire of someone who didn't even own a proper evening gown was probably not to his standards if he looked so displeased. I ignored the discomfort in the pit of my stomach and snatched the first emotion that I could get a hold of. One that was extremely easy to summon when it came to him. Aaron Blackford, I hissed, finding my voice. What in the world is wrong with you? My chest heaved up and down. Don't you know how to knock? I knocked. His tone was hard, matching his expression. Twice. That stupidly deep voice of his reverberated through my bathroom. I could have been naked, you know. Aaron shifted in front of me, not letting go of the knob. His large fingers gripping it on a way that made me wonder if it would give out under the pressure. "But you are not," he said, voice still hard. "You are definitely not naked." My gaze shot from his hand to his face. Just in time to watch how those two blue eyes jumped to my shoulders, traveled along my neck, and then returned to my eyes. His expression clouded further as we looked at each other for a long moment. My palms started sweating, the longer neither of us said anything. Jesus, what is even happening? My heart raced faster, the more the air filled up with a tension I didn't understand. It was almost suffocating. Much more than earlier in the kitchen. So much that I felt how my guard came down, all kinds of thoughts assaulting my mind with nothing to stop the bruising. "Is there?" I broke the silence. My voice coming out breathy. "Is there anything wrong?" He shook his head. "Just once." His eyes bounced down my body again very quickly. "You found a gown?" "I did," I admitted, looking down briefly. It's been such a long time since I last went on a date that I forgot it was even there. I watched his expression take on a new edge, making me feel incredibly stupid for saying something like that. "Well, that doesn't matter. Not that I'd wear this to any date anyway, I guess. It's the only one I have, so I hope it's okay." I passed my sweaty palms along my thighs, stopping myself at the prospect of messing with the fabric. Aaron's throat worked. "It'll do. It'll do." I had no idea what I had been expecting him to say, but I'd be lying if I said that hadn't stung a tiny little bit. "Good," I answered, looking away, not letting my shoulders sink. "Let's go then." Instructing my mouth to smile, I only looked back at Aaron when it was toothy and big. He remained where he was, not uttering a single word. "Come on," I told him, keeping that fake megawatt smile where it was. "You don't want to be late, do you?" A couple of seconds after, he moved out of the way. Without a stare-off, which I appreciated because I wasn't in the mood to look at him just yet. I stepped out of the bathroom, and I made sure of two things. 1. I didn't brush his chest with my shoulder. And 2. I didn't have any reason to feel hurt by whatever Aaron Blackford said.